Oh, hey Danny, can you please pick up that board game over there?
Okay, sure.
So tell me, when you hold this board game, does it bring you joy?
Yes. Yes, it does, actually.
Alright, put it with the others.
With the hundreds of board games that have been released annually, that number is increasing exponentially with huge Kickstarter campaigns, new independent board game publishing companies appearing, bigger companies branching out. There is an oversaturated market of board games out there for customers to actually choose from. And so when a really cool board game comes along and piques your interest, there's a certain level of hype that follows that. The idea that there's a small window of opportunity to purchase a game so that you don't miss out because there's limited amounts of stock drives us to impulse buy certain games and fork over our hard-earned cash to buy games that we may or may not necessarily enjoy 7 months down the track. So in this vlog, we look at 9 things that you should consider before handing over your hard-earned money to buy a board game that you may or may not love. Aspect number 1 is to consider very carefully what exactly that you're buying into. Are you buying into a game idea that is unique and that hasn't ever been done before? Are you buying it because you really want the miniatures or the components? Or is it the theme that really draws your attention into? So if it's a medieval fantasy theme or a cat theme, are those the themes that you think you would really enjoy? Also, think about the mechanics. Are you paying for a mechanic that you have already seen 10 times before? Are you paying for a mechanism that is revolutionizing a pre-existing mechanism? You know, games like The Seventh Continent have earned so much money from their Kickstarter campaigns because of the concept and idea that they bring to the table. You know, are you paying for a legacy game or a campaign game that only lasts for a certain number of rounds? Are you paying for a game that has particular modules, which allows you the flexibility to play in all these different ways? Are you paying for nostalgia? You know, the idea of a game like Fireball Island being reinvigorated because it evokes that childhood memory of enjoying a really cool 3D structure marble looking game. Games like Nagaraja, really great to-play game, uses dice in a different way. These Nagaraja sticks, or these fate sticks, are actually D4s that kind of affect the choices that you have in the game. Also, have you considered whether the game is actually a sequel or a reinvention of a pre-existing game? So Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, a follow-up to Imperial Settlers with completely new decks, new focus, and tweaks to familiar mechanics that people are quite used to if they've played the original game. Near and far. Okay, you've got this Atlas book idea, you've got lots of different ways to play the same game so that the game is quite flexible and adaptable to different groups. You've got games where there's a second edition or a reinvigorated version like Empires of the Void 2. You really need to think carefully about what you're actually paying for and whether you're paying money to get something that you already actually have. So for example, A Fake Artist Goes to New York is a very simple drawing game that uses about 10 different textures, and one person doesn't know what everybody else is drawing. But this game could simply be made using a pad of paper and a packet of textures from your local $2 shop. Consideration number 2 is to think about the potential experience that the board game will provide to the people that you're going to be playing with. Does it have a wider appeal, or does it appeal to a certain group of people with a certain particular interest? So for example, the game Just One is a word deduction game that involves everyone. It's really quick to play, quick to get into. This is going to appeal to the mass market because, you know, most people like word association games, whereas a game like Compounded, where players have to build compounds and interact with a periodic table, you know, that's probably going to appeal to people who have an interest in science and an interest in chemistry. So this is a little bit more targeted towards a specific niche of people. You've also got to think about whether the game has a limited lifespan. You know, the game might have a potentially engaging story and you get to select your characters and experience with several campaigns, but if the game has a finite ending to it, are you going to be satisfied with that end or that experience? If it's a game that requires the same group of people to play through the campaign, that's also going to be another potential consideration. And are you going to be able to get, 4 people to the game 11 times in a row or across 11 sessions? Be realistic about how you're going to get people to play the actual game. Also, if you're looking at something like a deep Euro game, does the Euro game do something different? Does it provide a relatively different experience to some of the other Euro games you played out there? And you really have to think about ultimately the potential longevity of the game in your collection. Are you going to play it once? Are you going to play it 5 times? Or are you going to play it 0 times and leave it still wrapped in its shrink wrapping on top of your board game shelf? Zolk and the Mayan calendar has a really cool, interesting twist to worker placement games because it has these little cog wheels where once you place your little worker on the wheel, you've got to kind of wait until it gets to the right spot on the board before you pull off to gain its effects. So Zolk and the Mayan calendar is a really great example of doing a mechanic in a very different and unique manner. Aspect number 3 is thinking carefully about where you actually get your information about a board game from. Are you getting it from a Kickstarter page, which is trying to influence you to buy the game and commit money to it? Are you getting it from online YouTube board game reviewers? Are you getting it from, a board game profile on Board Game Geek? Are you getting recommendations from friends or family or demoing a game at a convention? It could just simply be walking to a board game shop, being caught by the cover art and being drawn in and looking at the explanation on the back. You really need to think about the reliability of the information that you're being presented about a game. And if you've got the time, it's well worth spending a little bit of extra time looking at multiple sources and multiple opinions on a particular game and looking up on the forums on Board Game Geek to see other people's experiences before committing money to a game, especially if the game costs over $100. The 4th point to consider is you need to think about whether do you already own that game in your collection at home or some form of that game. There is a huge plethora of word games out there, worker placement games, story-driven games. Before buying a new game, think about whether another game in your collection already does what that game essentially does. What does the game that you're about to buy do differently to the game that you're already at home? There's games like Mysterium out there, and then there's One Key. And, some people say that One Key is like a lighter version of Mysterium. Do I really need both? Probably not, but I do like the art of it, so I bought both of them. Huge social deduction games like The Resistance and Secret Hitler and House of Danger, and if you really like that one, you might consider buying the follow-up to it, War with the Evil Power Master. You've got Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert. Forbidden Desert, a little bit more meaty, a little bit more strategic. Forbidden Island, really great introductory game for younger gamers. And you've got the plethora of drawing and guessing games out there. Telestrations, Pictomania, you name it, there's heaps of them. I really love Codenames, but, getting Codenames Duet, pretty much very similar games, except Duet is cooperative and we're working together and I can play it with just one other person. So that kind of warranted or justified in my mind that Codenames Duet was actually quite important because I love the original game so much that I did want to play it at the 2-player and in a cooperative version. So that's why I got both of those. If there is a game like Decrypto that comes out, that is a next level up Codenames, a far superior version, then it might warrant the purchase. So you need to really evaluate what you have in your collection. You need to have a really clear knowledge of what games you have and how buying that next game might either replace or supersede that game you already have. So, which version of Pandemic do you want to play? Aspect number 5 is thinking about what you're paying for in terms of the components that you get inside the board game box. Is the game just selling you some glorified models or miniatures that are attached to a very simplistic game system? Or are those miniatures and board game components actually going to enhance your game experience by serving some sort of functional purpose to the game? Do you simply buy a game because you really just want to display it and look at it? Or do you buy a game where you want everything to kind of work together and fit together as an engine? So you really have to draw the line and always find out more information about a game, because that is a really good mantra to follow in terms of buying board games, because that extra information that you have is going to help you make a better decision. Azul and Sagrada have, tiles and, really cool colored looking, transparent colored dice that actually serve a functional component in the game. And they do look pretty, but that's not simply all they're there for. They're there to enhance the game experience itself. Aspect number 6 is to think about the worth of the game itself in terms of its price tag. First of all, examine the box size. Then try and find the list of components on the box. And this will indicate to you what actually you're paying for inside the box. Are you paying for a deck of cards? Are you paying for tokens? Are you paying for some wooden dice? Really well and truly investigate. If you can't find a list of components on the box, look for it online. Question a game as to whether it is too expensive or not expensive enough. Think about whether there's a limited print run, or whether there is a second edition, or whether the game is out of print or out of stock. Really think about the other factors that affect the development of a board game. If a game like this is going to cost $200, I'm going to start questioning, hang on a minute, why is the game so small going to cost so much unless there's a bar of gold in it? And then that'll depend on the gold prices, I guess. So really think about the game itself. And sometimes boxes can be larger than they actually should be, and that's more for the shelf eye-catching factor. You are paying for the game, so it's really well worth knowing that, if you're going to buy a car or buy a house, you're going to really look into where your money's actually going. So if you're going to buy an expensive game in particular, you really need to know where that money's going. Remember, it is your money and ultimately your choice. Point number 7 is all about how the game fits into your pre-existing collection. First of all, you need to consider the amount of space a board game can take up. Some people live in small apartments, some people live in bigger houses, some people have the pleasure of having a game room. How big is the game and how much shelf space does it take up? And does it actually fit amongst all the other games that you have? So think about how it fits physically, as well as how it fits as an option for a board game night as well. Because you don't want, 10 worker placement games and only one word game. You want a diverse range of choices so that when you have a game night, people have a lot of different things to choose from. And, don't just all have fantasy theme. Have some fantasy, some real themed games, some pattern abstract games. Have a good diverse collection. And that's all about building a really cool library of games. Also, be realistic. Is this a game that people are going to want to play? How many people that are actually interested in this game? Could you be better off just playing Magic? Or could you be better off playing a drawing game? Think about the sort of personalities that fit into your life and whether they actually want to play a really deep 2-hour Euro game or not. Think about the setup time. Is the game that needs to be set up and then left set up? And then therefore nobody can use that table for the next 5 months or 5 years. So think about how the game will fit into your life. Point number 8 is all about doing some really effective research. It's so critically important to research a game very thoroughly. There are some games that have pages and pages of frequently asked questions about rule conflicts, missing components, production errors, printing errors, scalability, games or asymmetric factions that work well with some groups and not well with others, things that you need to print off online to replace existing rules or components and stickers. Because if someone, for example, finds that there is an aspect of the game that might be broken, I know in Steampunk Rally where you build these machines, you can have a certain combination of machine parts that actually creates a perpetual machine that keeps going and going. And so, the design of Steampunk Rally have released this replacement card to kind of alleviate that effect. But, that's not only something that I consider to be broken, but it's also really cool as well that, there is a combination there that not even the designers realize kind of creates that combo effect, which, really absolutely amazes me. Really do the research, look at the fine print, look on the forums, have a look at Board Game Geek. It is a beautiful library of resources, of information, of everything to do with the game that you might want to purchase. And summing up, I hope all of those 8 tips are going to help you to be better prepared when you buy your next game, and I hope those tips have really assisted you in some way in making your next board game choice. And the board game hobby is such a beautiful community of people, and the games themselves just continually amaze me at how innovative and inventive game designers are, how creative this community of hobbyists are. And I really want to pay a homage to all of the people who contribute to the board gaming community. And I say that with a lot of love, because I have loved board games since I was a young kid, and creating this channel has just meant that I've been able to share so much love for board games in general. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary vlog. If you really like this video, please remember to hit the like, subscribe and share button. And I want to say a huge thank you to all the people who still currently subscribe to my channel and support me. Once again, thank you very much. This is Danny signing out. I'll see you guys again soon. Next time. Goodbye.